Hey gang, welcome to another episode of Value Added, the real estate podcast. On today's episode, we're chatting with Jeff Holst. Jeff is a multifamily investor primarily in southeastern Michigan, as well as the Chattanooga, Tennessee market. He is also the host of the Old Fashioned Real Estate podcast, as well as the Last Life Ever podcast. So without further ado, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to Value Added, the real estate podcast where we speak with the brightest minds in the world of real estate who provide, create, and realize value in an ever-changing market. And now your host, Nick Walters.
And we're live. So let's go back and talk about your podcast, Old Fashioned Real Estate. So we were just talking offline. Your podcast it's very loose in nature, very similar to this one. But you're hosting a podcast with a buddy of yours over a glass of whiskey in the form of an old fashioned. So tell us a little bit about the background of the podcast and how it evolved.
Sure. So, it actually started out as a joke for us. We were setting up our first syndication, right? So we were thinking, okay, what are we going to name our managing entity? And we were at Ruth Chris in the bar drinking old fashions. And I just kind of jokingly said, hey, let's just call it Old Fashioned Management. That sounds kind of cool. People, it was just an inside joke, right? We were drinking old fashions, so we thought we'd call it that. And we did. And then we liked syndicating. We weren't sure if we were going to want to keep doing it or not, but we liked it. So we decided that we wanted to raise our profile. And I was like, well, we should have a YouTube show or something. And I was like, let's just call it Old Fashioned Real Estate and we'll just drink on YouTube. And we were like, yeah, that sounds fun. So that's what we started doing. We just started drinking bourbon and talking about real estate. And we've been doing that for 2 years now. It's been really great though. We do 2 episodes a month. So it's not a ton of episodes, but we've been doing it 2 years and we've met some amazing people by doing it. Like the having a show is it's a game changer for getting to know people. So.
Yeah, I tell you what, I mean, that's how my podcast started. We launched I think May 1st of last year. We're in the throes of COVID and I'm a real estate broker. I'm a networker by trade. I used to live in New York City and I still do a lot of business in New York City. And during that time, we legally couldn't show apartments. So what do I do to just, to stay in touch with people? Well, everybody knows about Zoom now. I mean, Zoom is synonymous with Kleenex or another brand name that is just more synonymous with a just a general product, right?
Oh yeah, it's crazy. People go on other streaming platforms and call it Zoom, right? Like, oh, we're gonna do a Zoom call. They're on Skype.
Exactly.
Everything's Zoom now. I kind of wish I had bought a bunch of Zoom stock last March, though. That would have been a smart move.
Yeah, well, I don't even know if they're public or not, but if they are, I'm sure that their stock very similar to other outperformers in the last year. Fill in the blank: Netflix, Amazon. Anything that is done well while we've been locked in our homes for the last year. But so Old Fashioned Real Estate. What do are you guys focused more on commercial real estate, residential? What are some? You mentioned you had Vinny Chopra on, who's a big real estate syndicator. What are you talking about?
So on the show we talk about my partner Brian and I, he's probably got the best name in all of real estate. His last name is Leverage, literally Leverage. So his name is Brian Leverage. So Brian and I, we'll talk about whatever we think is relevant to our own real estate careers. And we have an eclectic real estate investing approach. I mean, we do mostly value add multifamily in the in the like $1 million to $3 million range. So we're kind of below where the like big people like Chopra wouldn't, he's not interested in that at all. But that's good for us because then we don't have to compete with people for that. So that's what we do mostly. So we talk about that stuff a lot. But it's really an education platform for us. So we'll pick a topic like the market cycle, and we'll go into a deep dive for about 15 minutes on the market cycle and how you can predict where you are in the market cycle and what we think is going to happen in the market cycle. And then the next week it might be just an episode about how to determine the difference between your returns, right? Like maybe return on equity versus return on investment versus return on assets or whatever. So we'll go through this stuff and we just kind of dive into a topic, but we make it fun because we're drinking. And so we actually usually film like 2 or 3 at a time and then release them later. And you can always tell when we get to the third one. Like we get to that third one and we get a little bit sloppier and we start talking like, just whatever. But it's been a lot of fun. I mean, we really enjoy the show and we've had good feedback. So
that's a lot of fun. Now you got your law degree from Michigan State. Are you still a practicing attorney? And if you were in law before real estate, how did you transition from a legal background into real estate?
That's a big question. So I don't practice law anymore, and I haven't since 2010. So I graduated from law school in 2006, and I went full bore into starting my own law firm. I built up a bankruptcy firm at the exact right time. 2007, 2008, I was like, I'm going to do bankruptcies all the time. And then all of a sudden, everyone needed a bankruptcy. And I mean, I lived in a town up in Michigan where there was a GM plant that closed down. GM had filed bankruptcy that year as well. And it seemed like we just were so busy and everything was going really well. I had a television commercial. I hired another attorney to grow because my firm was growing so fast. And I was like, this is going to be amazing. And then I went to that summer, I went to Machu Picchu, which was kind of like the last thing on my bucket list. I had this sort of short bucket list of things I wanted to do when I was like in my teens. And I went to Machu Picchu and I came off the mountain and I got a voicemail from the attorney I hired saying that he had put in his 2-week notice, which was inconvenient. And then a week later, I was diagnosed with leukemia. And so I literally went from like doing really well to really bad really fast, right? So I went from 2 attorneys to 0 overnight, and it forced me into bankruptcy. It went like just like 2 weeks in, and I was like, this is not going to work out. I mean, I held on for a year and a half, but we just never were able to pull out of that. So 2010, I filed bankruptcy. I quit practicing law and I moved to Tennessee and took a job making like $600 or $700 a week. I'm like, I just need to do something different. I need good insurance because my leukemia was controlled at that point, but we really didn't know what the future was going to be like. And the treatments were very expensive. So insurance became super important. And I wanted to create some kind of income in case I died. So that's when I started buying real estate. And I was fortunate that it was 2010 and not, 2021, because the prices were a lot better back then than they are now. And we just started buying stuff and it was cash because I didn't have any credit. I didn't have any money really, but I was getting bonuses at work and I would take them and we'd go buy I went with a partner of mine up in Michigan and somebody I met in law school, and we bought a condo for $30,000 and we paid $15,000 each. That was it. I saved up $15,000 and I put all of my money into this condo, and that's how I got into real estate.
Huh. I love these stories of overcoming challenges in your life and getting to where you are now. I can't imagine going through what you went through battling leukemia, but what sort of lessons did you learn during that time that obviously got you through it? You obviously had the mindset and the drive to just keep going living each day, separately.
Yeah.
What did you learn during that time that you're now able to apply today?
Well, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is just, life's super short and like, you just can't live for someday. You have to live for now. So I've done all kinds of really great stuff since then. Last year, right before the coronavirus shut the world down, I went to Africa for the entire month of February. In fact, literally, like, we're recording this on February 17th. I don't know when it's released, but February 17th, right now, a year ago, this moment, I was summiting Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa. Like, literally, like, almost to the second. Like, because you do it in the middle of the night, and it was the 17th. So it was literally like right now is when I was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And it was like one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life physically. 7 days up the mountain to get to the summit. And, we left on the 10th and we climbed through the 17th and we came down on the 18th. And we kind of went up the mountain in one world, right? And came down in another because, like, there was no coronavirus in Africa and barely anyone had heard of it on the 10th. On the 18th, they were starting to shut stuff down in Africa. I mean, it was the weirdest thing. We had no internet access for 7 days, and then we came down and the whole world was different. It was insane. But yeah, to live like now, because you don't know what the future is going to bring, is super important. And then also, figure out a way to buy back your time as soon as you can. The real estate stuff has been fantastic. I spent 10 years before I got sick thinking someday I'm going to invest in real estate. And once I get my law firm stable, I'll start putting money into real estate. And that was the completely wrong strategy. And it's been amazing. Like 7 years after I bought my first piece of real estate, I quit my job. And now I just live on my real estate and I just kind of play around and have much, much more freedom than anyone else I know. I mean, I'm 43 or 42 right now. And I haven't, I haven't worked in 4 or 5 years. It's unbelievable.
It's such a great story. I appreciate you sharing that. With regards to your legal background, your education, and then your work experience before you said "F it," I'm burning the boats and going into real estate. What sort of skills from your legal world or education or knowledge have you been able to continue to apply into your real estate investing business today?
Yeah, well, so, there's a lot of stuff, right? So, we were doing transactional stuff. In bankruptcy, there's a ton of mortgages and security interests and different things like that. And there's a lot of like different ways to structure stuff that I saw people doing that gave me a huge advantage. And then even when I took the job in Tennessee, I was human resources / hiring / financing of semi trucks. Right. So I was hiring drivers and buying semi trucks, and I made all kinds of relationships with banks, and I learned all kinds of stuff about finance. And that stuff is unbelievably useful when it comes to real estate investing. The relationships are super important, and just being a lawyer adds a ton of credibility anyway. Like, you go into a bank and you want a loan, and they're like, you give these little bios of like your background, and you're like, yeah, I have this real estate, I'm a lawyer, I have an MBA, and people are like, oh man, like, we want to loan this guy money. So that stuff has been fantastic. But I think the biggest advantage is just being able to understand contracts and also operating agreements, things like that, on a super deep level.
Cool. Yeah, that's really great. So let's talk about your real estate investments. You said that you dabble in that $1 million to $3 million range. You're staying under the radar from the big dogs that are looking at 150, 200 units plus. So let's talk about your current portfolio that you have, and how it's stood up to the wrath of COVID.
Yeah, so we've been very fortunate. I'm still constantly watching the horizon because I think it's really unknown what's going to happen with the CDC eviction moratoriums and all this stuff that's out there still. But I have pretty much 2 markets I invest in. I invest in like Southeast Michigan, like Metro Detroit, not so much in the city, but surrounding Detroit. And a lot of that stuff is subsidized housing, workforce subsidized housing. So that's held up really well. We're at like 70 or 80% Section 8 tenants. And those people, they're paying because the government's paying for them, right? And so that's been really helpful. And the stuff that we have down in Chattanooga, we've been very fortunate that we've had a very solid, collection rate. So we're probably sitting maybe 1% less than where we were at this time last year in collections. And we have like no vacancy, and rents are still going up. There's so much demand for rent in Chattanooga. The only issue you have is if someone's not paying and you can't evict them. And that was true for a while because all of the courts have been shut down. No in-person hearings, things like that, for the better part of a year now. They've had a couple of windows where they opened up here and then they closed them right back down. And we were fortunate and able to sneak some stuff through during that time as well. But yeah, it's been holding up reasonably well. I can't complain.
So your portfolio in Southeast Michigan, about 70 to 80% of the units are made up of Section 8 housing. How about your Chattanooga portfolio? Do you have Section 8 tenants there, or what is the? Well,
I have one Section 8 tenant total, and that's an inherited tenant. The programs in Southeast Michigan, there are several different housing authorities, and some of them are pretty good and they're easier to work with. The housing authority here, I won't say they're terrible because, maybe I'll want to work with them someday and I don't want them thinking that, but they're more difficult than the ones in Michigan to work with. And they give you a little bit less flexibility. They're a little bit slower to react. And the rents tend to be further below market than what I'm comfortable with, what they're actually willing to pay. So it is what it is, but we've avoided the subsidized housing here in Chattanooga as a result of that.
Out of your portfolio that you currently manage, what percentage of the units that you have under your control have you acquired during the COVID era? And then the next question is, how have you been underwriting deals differently now than, call it, a year ago?
Sure.
Before COVID hit?
Yeah, so the first deal we closed under the COVID era was March 16th, one day into the shutdown. And so that one, it was like, do we actually want to buy this or not? We're not sure, but it's turned out really, really well. That was a big value add deal, and we've renovated it. We've been able to get most of the renovations done in the last year. And in fact, we just got an unsolicited offer that will profit us a reasonably a good percentage on our investment. So I think we might end up selling that. But that was a 16 unit. And then we didn't buy anything going into the summer. We just kind of sat tight. Just sort of see what was going to happen. And then this fall, we started underwriting deals again. And we just closed a 20 unit yesterday. And we have a 10 unit we're closing today, actually. So we're closing in a couple of hours. We're closing a 10 unit. So I'll pick up 30 units, and I've got 16 more under contract. That equates to about 20% of the multifamily units that I have. So to answer the question on that, what we've been doing to underwrite is we're assuming much longer periods of time before we can do turns. We have to be comfortable with the fact that the people are actually paying now, which, let's be honest, if you're paying 10, 12 months into the pandemic where we're at right now, you're probably still going to be paying 6 months from now, regardless of what happens with the eviction requirements and stuff like that. So, and of course, we don't really know. Policy can change dramatically. We're early in the new administration, but I'm seeing light at the end of the tunnel. COVID new case numbers are going down dramatically the last month. People aren't paying that much attention to it yet, but they will. The vaccine rollout, I know there's controversy about that, but it's been going pretty smoothly, all things considered. 1 million plus vaccine doses a day now. And that, to me, I think we're turning the corner, and we're 6 months or less from the end of the pandemic. So hopefully I'm right. We'll see, right? I really want to travel. I haven't been out of the country since I came back from Africa, and I want to go somewhere. It's driving me crazy.
I know. My wife and I were just talking. So I live in Connecticut, and there's only 3 states that we can go into without having to deal with following the rules. There's Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Rhode Island, which is kind of random. And we're like, where we want to travel. We love traveling. And so I think we're going to travel to Rhode Island for spring break.
Hey, Rhode Island's a nice state. You can get yourself some lobster in Providence or something out on the pier. Yeah, it'll be all right.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's Rhode Island is beautiful. We got engaged in Newport. We know Newport pretty well. So we're probably going to go back there. But
Newport is beautiful. It's fantastic. Yeah,
it is a great little town. But let's go back to your market. So you're in the Chattanooga market. Which is for our listeners, that's Eastern Tennessee, pretty close to the North Carolina border. If I remember.
We're right. We're less. It's interesting little. So there's two interstates that intersect here. So I-24 and I-75 cross in Chattanooga, and we're 35 miles from the North Carolina border, say 10 miles from the Georgia border, and about 25 miles from the Alabama border. So we're kind of in this like 4-state region. But most of the investing we do here is either in Tennessee, Chattanooga proper, or North Georgia. By North Georgia, I'm talking 15 minutes from here, North Georgia. I'm not saying like Atlanta, which is technically North Georgia also, but that's about 2 hours. So we're 2 hours from Atlanta, 2 hours from Birmingham, about 2 hours from Cherokee, North Carolina, which is kind of a small market, but yeah, so in 2 hours from Nashville as well. So we're kind of in this little pocket of surrounded by stuff. So.
And North Georgia, are you looking in the Blairsville market at all?
I'm not. I mean, I'm really looking at Ringgold and Fort Oglethorpe, which are like these small towns that are just south of Chattanooga. So,
gotcha. My best friend from college is from Blairsville, Georgia. Way up there, pretty close to North Carolina. That's why I asked.
Yeah, that's further. So that's further east than where we're at. So I don't like. I mean, there's nothing wrong. That's a cool little town. Actually, I went through there once. It's interesting, but yeah, it's not. It's a little bit far for us.
Gotcha. So, what's in your pipeline? What are you looking at in terms of things that may be closing in the next year?
Yeah, so I have a 16 unit under contract. It's in my hometown, Hickson. It's like a suburb of Chattanooga. So I'm excited about that. But we have these big goals for the year. We want to close 400 units this year. I've got 30 that, after today, we'll have closed 30 and I got 16 more. So that's 46, but 400 is 100 a quarter, and like the quarter is going to be done before we know it, and I'm going to be at 46. So I'm like halfway behind already. But you do one big deal, it makes up for it. Another thing is we bought an office building in late December, and we're renovating that, and we're moving into it ourselves. So Brian and I are going to move there and have our own office space instead of working out of our basement. Or at least I've been working out of my basement. He actually has been working out of a property management company that he owns a piece of. But we just want to get, doing that. And then we've got some flips going on, stuff like that. And then Brian's he's in new construction a little bit too. So he used to build apartments. Now he's building houses. So we're going to try to do a little bit more of that stuff as well. So
cool. In terms of raising capital, are you guys using your own funds, or have you syndicated any deals? Tell us about how you're putting together the cap stack for your transaction.
Yeah. So because we're dealing with smaller deals, a lot of times we do end up using our own funds, or we'll use like one investor or something like that. But we have syndicated. In fact, one of the deals we syndicated with the 20 unit that we syndicated this year, and we just closed it yesterday. But the total raise was only $475,000. So it's 6 or 7 investors putting 50 grand each or whatever in, and that's worked pretty well for us, those sort of mini syndications. I mean, we still have to go through all the, PPM docs and all that stuff, but it's not too complicated. And so we've done that, and we have a core group of investors that pretty much anything we present to them, they trust what we're doing, and they'll say, yeah, I'm going to throw in, some chunk of cash. And then we like to do these things that they're not really syndications, but they're like not really, they're just kind of a different structure. I kind of made it up. Basically what we do is we have a couple of investors that are partners with us in an LLC. They're, it's not like a GP thing. It's like, there's 3 of us. We each own a third of the LLC, and they have more cash than us. So they'll, like, when we find a deal, they'll loan the money to the LLC, interest only loan to the LLC, and then we'll go buy whatever it is using that capital as the down payment, and then we'll refinance after we stabilize the property and pay them their money back, and we just all keep owning the property, thirdsies or whatever. So
that's essentially a loan in the form of debt, but they are a part of the management team in this LLC, and they're going to have an equity stake in the upside in the deal.
Yeah, that's right. So they'll get, we'll give them 6% interest only. We have two people we do this with. And you do have to be careful. They have to be active, right? Otherwise it becomes a syndication. So you have to have the right people to do that. But these are people that, they are pretty active in the process, particularly in the underwriting, particularly in the disposition side. But they're very active in it. They're accepting the full liability. They're signing the guarantees on the notes, all that kind of stuff. And in fact, are even signing the guarantee on the note to themselves, right? And that's part of the deal. But and the banks don't seem to care. They look at that as just a capital injection from the partners. So because that partner is on the deal, they're like, hey, we don't care what the source of your 20% down is or whatever. And so it's been working really well. We kind of fell into that on accident when I was really short on capital in 2011. We had bought a couple of deals and we didn't have any money left. And I was talking to my dad one day and he was like, oh, I kind of want to find deals. Like, why don't we do something together? And I was just kind of like, hey, Dad, like I got this condo. Like, why don't you, take a mortgage on the condo and then we'll partner up and so he loaned money on a different deal at the time. And then we found another deal shortly after that. And he was like, well, I'll just loan the money to the company this time. And I'm like, all right, cool. Cause we'd already started this company. And then that worked pretty well for him and he was happy to do it. And then afterwards I was like, hey, this structure is kind of cool. Like it works. So the 16 unit I bought in March, we did it like that. I have none of my own money in it. And, it looks like we're going to pay off the other guy and then still make a big return when we sell it here pretty quick. So.
Jeff, we're going to conclude this episode with the hard-hitting questions. These are the questions that we ask every one of our listeners. I always love to start out with, what's your why?
Yeah, I want to help people live the best version of their life. So I actually have another show, which I didn't even mention, but I feel like I'll put it in here. It's called Last Life Ever, and it's literally about living the best version of your life. So we interview people doing extraordinary things. One person we interviewed hike the Appalachian Trail for charity. Another person we interviewed was the comedian TJ Miller, right? We just interview people that just are doing cool things to help our audience recognize that they can do extraordinary things. And it comes down to me getting sick and saying, someday may never come. You need to do it now. And so that's why I do that show, but it's also why I do old fashioned real estate. It's why I do the syndication stuff. Listen, I have enough cash flow from my real estate. I could just go live on the beach and scuba dive every day. And that would be pretty fun. I might get a little bored, but it'd be pretty fun, I think. And I just kind of went, this is a great life I live and other people should be able to do it too. So that's why I do it.
Cool. Is there a recent book or another piece of media that you've consumed recently that's added significant value to your life or your career?
Yeah, so there's so many. I mean, I read tons of books. If you look behind me, I've got a gazillion books back there. But I'm reading right now The Laws of Success by Napoleon Hill. It sort of predates Think and Grow Rich. It's much more involved. It starts out a little slow, but it's fantastic. Really, really good. And we're doing it in a book club. So we're really diving deep into it. And it's really kind of opened up some new possibilities for me mentally. So,
Jeff, how do you like to pay it forward?
Well, the shows that I do and stuff like that are the biggest thing I do. But we actually started a foundation recently, the Last Life Ever Foundation. And we take and make small contributions where they make huge differences. So, for example, we actually just paid to fix a guy's car who's a taxi cab driver in El Salvador. And it was for him, that's life-changing money because it's, you give him $500 and now he can feed his family, stuff like that. So we try to find and identify the stuff that slips through the cracks, even just buying gift cards to Subway or something for like homeless people. It makes a huge difference for them. So we try to do that. That's our big thing right now.
That's super cool. What is that foundation called? Just so I can plug that.
We don't even have a website or anything for it, so it's like really hard to plug. But it's called Last Life Ever Foundation, and right now it's completely self-funded by myself and my partner in Last Life Ever. We're working on the 503c status. Once we get that, we might put up a portal to take donations. But we don't want to make it into we're trying to do a money grab, right? Like it's really about just helping people. But we do think that if we get more capital, we can help more people. So eventually we'll start taking cash from people.
That's great. Jeff, knowing what you know now and your life experiences battling and overcoming cancer and now building a sizable real estate portfolio, what would you tell yourself? What piece of advice would you give your 21, 22-year-old recent college graduate self?
Yeah, I mean, it should be obvious, right? Don't wait, just go do it. But the real thing is, the biggest mistake I made was waiting too long to get in real estate. But the second biggest was not getting into multifamily sooner. So I would tell myself, don't wait to get into real estate, and as soon as possible, get into multifamily.
Jeff, how can our listeners learn a little bit more about you and your various companies and get to know you a little bit more?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm really active on Instagram. It's at Jeffrey Holst. But otherwise, the Last Life Ever Facebook group, we have this, it's just Last Life Ever private group on Facebook. That's where I hang out most of the time. So they can get my best stuff in there.
Jeff Holst, this is a great story. I really appreciate you sharing with us today and adding your value. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it as well.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave a rating and a review, which will help us introduce the podcast to other listeners. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which will give you access to other episodes you may have missed. Lastly, if you'd like to learn more about investing alongside us, then head on over to valueaddedpodcast.com. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you next week.